All right, so now we want to be able to register a user, create a new user. So in Postman, I'm going to add a new request here, and it's going to be a post request, and I'm going to have this go to API/users because we're just creating a user. So I want to stick to a RESTful syntax here. And let's just say create new user. And then here we're going to change this to post and URL/API/users. Right now it's not going to get anything except not found, but let's go ahead and create now in our user controller. I'm going to copy this function here, and I'm going to go right under it above the user profile, and let's say register a new user. It's going to be a post request to API users. It's going to be public, and let's call this register user. Now we're going to get data from the body, except in addition to name and email, or I'm sorry, email and password, we want to get name. So we want to get those three pieces of data from the body. We want to see if the user exists. So let's say const user exists, and this can stay the same. We want to find by the email, and then let's actually get rid of this, and let's say if the user exists, then we want to send an error, so res.status, and this is going to be a 400, which is a bad request, and then throw new error, and user already exists. And then after that, if, let's say const user equals await, and then take the user model and call the create method, and create will take in an object with what we want to add, which is going to be the name, the email, and the password. And I know right now this password is unencrypted, it's just plain text, but I'm going to get to that in a minute. We're going to use some Mongoose middleware to encrypt it. So after that, let's say if user, so if everything goes okay and the user is created, then let's res.status, and we're going to respond with a 201, which means something was created, and then JSON, and what I'm going to send back is the same data that we sent from the login. So this, even the token too, because I want to be able to basically authenticate right after we register. Okay, and then in the else here, I'm just going to do a res.status 400, and let's say throw new error, and say invalid user data. And that should do it. So I'm going to make sure I save this, and I'm going to export down here, register user. And then let's go into our user routes, and let's import. Actually, we'll go right here and say register user. And it's going to be a post request to just slash. So I'm going to add right here router.route for slash, and then it's a post. And it's not protected, so we don't have to add the protect middleware, so we're just going to add register user. So now let's try that out. If we go back here, if I just send it with no data in the body, I'm going to get a message generated by Mongoose. It says user validation failed, name, path, name is required, email is required, password is required, and that all comes from our model, because here you'll see that this stuff is required. Okay. Now in the body, I'm going to go ahead and send raw JSON, and let's pass in here a name. So for name, I'm going to say, I don't know, Steve Smith, And let's do an email, steve@example.com, and then a password. Now, one thing I almost forgot to do is encrypt the password. So for now, I'm not going to send this just yet. What I'm going to do is go to the user model, and I'm going to add a piece of middleware. So we can actually set certain things to happen on saves or on finds and other actions and other methods. So I want to actually say before we save, I want to encrypt the password. So we already brought in bcrypt, so that's already up there. And the way that we can add middleware is on the user schema, just like we added a method above, except we're going to say .pre, because we want this to happen pre-save. So before we actually save, we're going to run an async function, and this is going to take in just next, async function next. And now in here we want to encrypt the password, so I'm going to create what's called a salt, because we need this salt to actually hash the password asynchronously. So there's a method on bcrypt called gen_salt, which will generate a salt, and it takes in a number of rounds. I'm going to use 10. Now this returns a promise, so we do need to have await. That creates the salt. Now I'm going to take this .password, which pertains to the user that we're creating, their password, and set that to await. And then on bcrypt we have a method called hash, and I'm going to pass in this .password. So initially this .password is the plain text password, but now we're resetting it to be the hashed password. Okay, and then this takes in the salt as a second argument. Now, one thing that's really important that we want to add here is if we only want to do this if the password field is sent or if it's modified. When we have the update profile functionality and we update, let's say, our name or our email, but not the password, we don't want this to run, because if it does, it's going to create a new hash and we're not going to be able to log in. So there's just a simple check we need to do here. We can say if not this is modified, and pass in the field that we want to check, which is password. Okay, and this is all part of Mongoose, so we can check to see if something's been modified or not. If it's not been modified, or it's not been, added or sent, then we just want to call next and move on. And if it has been modified, then this will run and it will hash the password. So I'm going to save that, and now this should automatically run pre-save. We don't have to bring it in to our user controller or anything. So when we register here, we're just as we create a new user, even though we're using create, it's basically syntactic sugar for the .save method. So that will run even though we're calling create. And then this plain text password will be encrypted through that piece of middleware. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's try it out. I'm going to go ahead and send this. And now we get back the user, we get back the token. Now the password doesn't get sent back, so let's check the database. I'm going to go to Compass users and just refresh here. And let's check out Steve Smith, and the password you can see is in fact hashed. All right. So I mean I used to do all the hashing here manually in the controller, but I think having this little piece of middleware is really helpful. So we don't have to actually, muck up our controller with all that stuff. It's just very clear, and I think it's pretty clean. All right, so we're now able to log in. We're now able to register. So the next thing that I want to do is go back to the front end and start to work this into our application. We need to have a sign in and a sign up form, and we need to create our user reducer, our user actions, including the login and register. So in the next video, we're going to switch back to the back end, back to the front end.